Okay, so we're diving into some pretty murky waters today. This whole Hunter Biden pardon situation.
Yeah, presidential pardons. Always a bit of a powder keg.
Especially when it involves the president's own son.
Exactly. A president sworn to uphold the law, making a decision that directly benefits his own kid.
It's definitely raising some eyebrows. A lot of people are talking about this.
Yeah, and we're going to try to unpack it all for you today. All the legal and ethical stuff that maybe you haven't had time to dig into.
Absolutely. So to start, what exactly was Hunter Biden pardoned for?
So there were two main things. First, a federal felony gun charge.
Okay, serious stuff.
And then tax convictions. He was looking at some pretty significant potential prison time, which this party just wipes away.
Completely overrides it. And this is where it gets tricky, because President Biden had previously said, flat out, that he would not pardon or commute his son's sentence.
Yeah, there are quotes out there from Biden himself and from Karine Jean-Pierre, his press secretary, stating this pretty clearly.
So this part of it feels like a pretty big U-turn. Makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes.
Right, like was this some kind of calculated move? Or did something change his mind? It's hard to say.
And of course, you can't talk about this without talking about the accusations of political motivations.
Oh yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? And it's interesting because both Biden and his critics are basically using the same argument, just from opposite sides.
They're both playing the political weaponization card. It's like a mirror image.
Exactly. Biden is saying, look, they're going after my son to try and take me down. And then you've got the Republicans saying, no, Biden is abusing his power to shield his son from facing the consequences.
Two sides of the same coin, but which one is actually true?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Right. So let's break it down. Biden's perspective is that the charges against Hunter were purely politically motivated. Attacks aimed at him, not his son. He even called it a miscarriage of justice.
And he's saying that Hunter was basically singled out because of their family connection.
And to be fair, the timing of these charges, it does make you wonder.
It does. Happening right in the middle of the 2020 election cycle.
But then on the flip side, you have Republicans, particularly Congressman James Comer, just slamming this pardon, calling it a blatant abuse of power.
Yeah, Comer's saying there's actual evidence of wrongdoing here. And that the charges against Hunter, they're just scratching the surface.
The tip of the iceberg, he said.
Exactly.
So we've got Biden saying it's a witch hunt. We've got Comer saying it's a cover-up.
Yep, and everyone's picking sides.
And it's worth pointing out, this isn't the first time a president has used their pardon power in a way that benefits someone close to them. It's actually a bit of a recurring theme.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at Trump. He pardoned Charles Kushner.
The father of his son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
Right.
And then later nominated Charles Kushner to be the U.S. envoy to France.
So you see the parallels, right?
Yeah.
Two presidents
Yeah.
facing accusations of using this pardon power to protect their families, both facing a ton of criticism from the other side of the aisle.
And it makes you wonder about the ethics of the whole thing. The presidential pardon power. Just how much leeway does a president have?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. And speaking of Trump, he's been pretty outspoken about this whole Biden-Hunter situation, right?
Oh, yeah. Very critical of the pardon, calling it an abuse and miscarriage of justice.
Which is, a little ironic.
It is, a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we have to remember, Trump himself issued some pretty controversial pardons during his presidency.
Yeah, especially those connected to the Mueller investigation.
And then there were the pardons for some of the people involved in the January 6th Capitol riot. So it's a bit of a double standard.
Okay, so there's obviously a lot of political posturing going on here, both sides spinning this story to fit their narrative. But what about Hunter Biden himself? I mean, in the middle of all this, he did release a statement.
He did.
Acknowledging his past mistakes, his struggles with addiction, and saying that he's committed to, rebuilding his life, helping others who are facing similar challenges.
It's easy to get caught up in the political drama. But there is a human element to this story. And I think regardless of how you feel about the pardon, it's worth acknowledging that addiction is a tough thing. And that Hunter Biden seems to be trying to make things right.
To move forward, so let's dive into the specifics of this pardon, legally speaking. Just how far-reaching is this pardon power?
Well, it comes straight from Article 2 of the Constitution, and it's pretty broad. But it's not unlimited. Impeachment, for example, is specifically excluded.
Oh, right.
But in this case, what it means is that the gun and tax cases against Hunter Biden are essentially done, finished, dismissed. And we haven't heard anything from the special counsel, David Weiss, about pursuing anything further.
So as far as the legal system is concerned, this is it.
It is. Case closed. But that doesn't mean all the questions surrounding his past actions just disappear. And it definitely doesn't mean the political storm is going to die down anytime soon.
It really makes you think about that whole idea of blind justice, right? Like, is it really blind when you're talking about the president's son?
Yeah, that's a big question here. Like, would any of this have happened the same way if his last name wasn't Biden?
It's hard to say for sure.
It is. But this whole case could end up being a textbook example of how, presidential pardons and accusations of nepotism and political influence can all get tangled up together.
It's a mess.
It is. And it's all happening against this backdrop of, increasing political polarization. It's like this case is just a tiny little version of the huge divisions we're seeing everywhere in society.
Like everybody's just retreating into their own corners, seeing everything through their own partisan lens.
Yeah, it's like these echo chambers, right? It's almost impossible to have a real conversation about any of this.
It feels like the goalposts are always moving. You can never pin anything down.
And that's why I think it's so important to really try to engage with, sources that show different perspectives, even the ones you might not agree with.
It's easy to just dismiss the other side, right?
Yeah.
To say, oh, they're just biased or they don't know what they're talking about.
It is easy to do that, but it doesn't help anything. It just makes those divides even deeper. We need to be willing to actually listen to each other, to consider different ways of looking at the facts, and to admit that situations like this are complicated. There's not always a simple answer.
It's easier said than done, though, right? Especially these days when we're just bombarded with information all the time.
It is.
How are we supposed to sift through all the noise, all the spin, the fake news? How do we even know what to believe anymore?
It's a constant battle, I think. You have to be really critical, skeptical, and you have to be willing to engage with sources that make you think differently, that challenge your assumptions.
It's like we all have to become our own fact checkers, our own editors.
Exactly. You can't just let algorithms or social media decide what you believe. You have to be in control, seek out different viewpoints, figure out which sources are actually credible, and then, make up your own mind.
And that's kind of what we're trying to do with this deep dive, right? We're not here to tell you what to think. We're just laying out the information, showing you different perspectives.
We're trying to give you the tools to think for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Being able to have, thoughtful and informed discussions, even when it's about something messy and controversial, like presidential pardons and, potential conflicts of interest.
Because this stuff matters.
It does. So where do we go from here? What are the long-term consequences of this pardon?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's still early. It's hard to say for sure what's going to happen. But there are a few possibilities. I mean, this pardon could end up, further eroding public trust in the justice system.
Yeah, especially if people start to think, oh, the system is rigged.
Right, that it only works for, powerful people, for people with connections.
Like there's one system of justice for the elites and another one for everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a dangerous perception to have. Yeah. Whether it's actually true or not, it can really damage things.
It breeds cynicism, distrust, this feeling that the rules don't apply equally to everyone.
Exactly. And when people start feeling that way, that's when you start to see social unrest. People stop caring about participating in the system. Yeah. Democratic institutions start to weaken. So that's the worst case scenario.
Okay, so that's the doom and gloom scenario. But you mentioned there's another possible outcome, something more positive, maybe. Although honestly, given how things are right now, it feels a little far-fetched.
It might be. But this whole situation, it could actually spark a conversation, a real conversation about the purpose of presidential power and the limits of that power.
So basically reform, you think that's actually possible?
It's possible. It would definitely require people from both sides of the aisle to work together, which I know feels like a fantasy these days. But maybe, just maybe, this case, with all the attention it's getting, all the controversy, maybe it could be the thing that finally pushes people to say, okay, we need more accountability here, more transparency.
So what kind of reforms are we talking about?
Well, some legal experts, they've been talking about this for a while. They say there should be stricter rules about, when and how presidents can issue pardons. Maybe the president should have to explain their reasoning in detail, put it on the record.
Interesting.
Others have suggested, limiting the pardon power to certain types of crimes.
Huh.
Or saying that family members should be completely off limits.
Those are some pretty big changes. Do you really think there's any chance of something like that happening?
It's hard to say. It would require a major shift in the political landscape. But hey, stranger things have happened.
So we've got this vulnerability in the system, and now we just wait and see if there's the political will to actually fix it.
That's it in a nutshell. It's a test. Not just for President Biden, but for our institutions and for all of us. How are we going to react to this? Are we just going to keep yelling at each other from our little echo chambers? Or are we going to use this as an opportunity to have a real conversation about how to make our democracy stronger? About how to make sure that justice is actually blind for everyone?
You know, it's a good point. We all come at this with our own baggage.
We do. It's like we see the world through these filters shaped by our own experiences, our beliefs.
And our biases.
Exactly. Biases. And I think it's so important to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with, something as complex as this.
Absolutely. Because it's easy to just shut down, right? When you hear something you don't like. Or something that challenges your worldview.
It is. And I get it. It's hard to admit that you might be wrong or that there might be another way of looking at things.
But that's how we grow, right? By being open to new ideas, even the ones that make us a little uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
That's a good one. So let's bring this back to our listeners for a second. What does all of this mean for them?
Here's the thing, right? How does this case, this whole pardon situation, how does it change the way you see things, the way you make decisions, the way you read the news, the way you talk to people about tough topics?
It's like, are you quick to judge? Or do you try to understand where the other person is coming from?
Right. Do you actually listen to what they have to say, even if you don't agree with it? And are you willing to, to change your mind if you see new evidence? That's a tough one.
It is. It takes courage to admit you were wrong.
It does. But it's important because in the end, the way we interact with information, the way we form our opinions, the way we treat each other, it all matters.
It shapes the kind of world we live in.
Exactly. For better or worse.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into presidential pardons and, family ties and all the complicated stuff that comes with justice, we want to leave you with a question to ponder. Does a president's duty to uphold the law, does that extend to their family, even when there might be a conflict of interest?
That's a big one. And there's no easy answer. It really makes you think about, what it means to be a leader, a parent, a citizen in a democracy.
That was messy.
It is. But that's life.
That's life. So we encourage all of you to keep thinking about this, to maybe do some more reading about it, to look at it from different angles, and most importantly, to come to your own conclusions about what President Biden's decision means.
Because it's not just about him, right?
It's about all of us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.